Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good to see you and be with you. I missed having Otto here today because he always said when I flew I caused problems for the whole airline and things were always late. And my flight actually left 30 minutes early yesterday. And there were like 25 people on the flight. I mean, it was like the best flight I've ever had in my life. Getting home after 1 o'clock in the morning didn't help, but still I thought about him and Paul and others who've always accused me of being a jinx when it comes to flying. So I'd like for you to open your New Testaments to Luke, the 15th chapter. I have no PowerPoint for you this morning, and so we're just going to talk and go through this. Delighted to see everybody. We have again a number of visitors with us. Thank you so much for joining us. It's always a great day to have friends and family with us and to be able to share our joy. As they say, joy shared is doubled. And so that's a great thing for us. The encouragement, impetus of this lesson was our Sunday night Bible study last week, when in the course of our study we talked about the prodigal. And so I just wanted to discuss that a little bit further. And here in Luke chapter 15, Jesus is going to teach a quick series of parables, 3 in total: the parable of the lost sheep, the parable of the lost coin, and the parable of the lost sons, or the prodigal son. I like sons because they both were lost at some point in time there. And as you read Luke 15, there's no break between those parables. There's no application at the end. And so it seems like that is something that was self-evident. And these parables, especially the last one, are well known to everyone. I mean, you can go outside the walls of a church and outside the context of a Bible class, and everybody knows what you're talking about when you say, well, the prodigal has returned. It's just a part of our culture. I want to focus mostly on this last parable. We're going to look at the other two as we go along there. But really what I want to focus on are the people that Jesus is speaking to. There are 2 groups here that are listening to Jesus. One very willingly, the other not so, kind of listening in a judgmental sort of matter. And I hope as we go through this and read this, and again, I'm not going to read the first 2 parables, but I'll read the entirety of the third one in just a few minutes. But I want us to think about the lessons that Jesus is teaching and the lessons Jesus is teaching to the people he's listening to. These 2 groups that are hearing what he says, because no matter who you are or where you are in your relationship with Jesus, you probably find yourself in one of those groups. And that means that message is going to be clear to you. And I don't believe we can really understand the impact and meaning of Jesus' parables unless we look through the filter of those people that he's talking to. So I will read the first 2 verses here of Luke 15. It says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.'" So again, these are the 2 groups, and if we don't understand who they are, we won't be able to make as good an application for ourselves. They understood what Jesus was teaching. They understood what Jesus was teaching them because they knew who they were. And I think that if we understand that, we'll be able to place ourselves. So the first group that is mentioned there in verse 1 are the tax collectors and sinners. Tax collectors were, your translation, older translations may have publicans. They were the ones who collected taxes for the Roman government. They were hated by the people, sometimes with just cause. Some of the tax collectors would overcharge the people more than what the Roman government had assessed. And of course, they were living high on the hog as a result of that, and the people didn't appreciate that. But the Jews also looked at the tax collectors as being those who are aiding and abetting the enemy. They're collecting taxes for the Roman government so that this army of occupation that's in Judah that belongs to Rome can be provided for and supported. And so when you think of tax collectors and sinners, or tax collectors specifically here, I don't want you to just think about a wee little man that climbs up a sycamore tree. Because it was much more than that for the Jews. Separate from those guys in this first group are the people that are referred to here as sinners. And to us, I think that doesn't sound so bad. Romans chapter 3 and verse 23 says we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, so we find ourselves there without too much difficulty. But I think you need to more look at this from the idea of the caste system that they have in India. We have all these levels of society, and the ones on the bottom are what are referred to as the untouchables. And they are people that were just ostracized by the society in general. It could be because of the occupation that they held, whether it was an occupation that was questionable or immoral, like prostitution, or they were thieves or even slave traders. We would look at them from that standpoint as a basic riffraff of society. But the word sinners here also includes those who had any kind of a handicap, any kind of a physical deformity. You remember when Jesus in John chapter 9 approached the city there, and there was a blind man there at the gate, and the disciples asked Jesus, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he should be born blind? And so if you had blindness or deafness or missing a limb or had some other sort of disease or physical problem, you're also in the category of sinner, regardless of your occupation. So both of these groups, the tax collectors and the sinners, are out with regards to Jewish society. They're not allowed in the synagogue. They were not allowed to come to the temple services. In the context of our parable, they were lost, but not only were they lost, no one was looking for them. Nobody wanted to find them. And nobody's even caring about them. In fact, the view of these people would be the world would be better off without them. And so these are here gathering around Jesus to hear what he has to say. But we have another group that's mentioned in verse 2, and that's the Pharisees and teachers of the law. And they're muttering, they're murmuring as they're looking at the scene. And they're looking and saying, Jesus is not only allowing these tax collectors and sinners near them, he's also receiving them. He's also eating with them. He's welcoming them. And so again, I bring Zacchaeus back up again, because as Jesus passed by, this publican sitting in the tree, he says, come down, Zacchaeus. I'm coming to your house. I'm going to stay with you tonight. I'm going to have that fellowship with you. And the Jews here didn't feel like they needed to explain their conclusions about Jesus any further. Listen, if he has association with tax collectors and sinners, then he's a tax collector, sinner. He's the same as they are. And if he's the same as they are, then we don't need to listen to him, let alone obey him. So, in light of that, Jesus is now speaking these three parables to these groups of people. And you need to look at them not as just three standalone parables, but three stories that are, and teachings that are directed to both of these groups. And as we go through this, I'm going to be looking at this in a different way. We'll talk about that, and then I want to share with you what I think their reaction would be. What would the tax collectors and sinners say to that? What would the Pharisees and the tax collectors say say about it? What's in their minds as these are going through? We're not told, so obviously it's supposition on my part, but I think it's a good exercise for us. So in the first 7 verses there, or actually 3 down through verse 7, we have the parable of the lost sheep. And of course the story is that Jesus said a person has 100 sheep and he loses one. And he leaves the 99, he goes and searches for this lost sheep until he's found it. And then comes back with it. And that there's rejoicing as a result of that. Listen, if you're a tax collector or a sinner and you're listening to this, you're thinking, there's no way anybody's coming to look for me. I'm just one sheep. He's got 99. I'm not even going to be missed. I have no value. There's no forgiveness available for me. There's no hope. And in fact, the only time I'm going to see God is when I'm standing before his judgment seat and things aren't going to go well there. And what Jesus is saying to that group is, no, I'm coming to look for you. And I'm going to look for you until I find you. And when I find you, I'm not going to say, you dumb little sheep, why did you put me through all of that so I had to come find you? Rather, he's going to put that sheep on his shoulder and take it home and says, we are going to have a party now. We're going to rejoice because you have been found. If you're a Pharisee or a tax collector, you're thinking, God rejoices over judging those people who are lost. He's glad to condemn the people that have wandered away. And they would have thought, there's no greater rejoicing that goes on in heaven than over people like me who are righteous and never wander away. And I don't need repentance. And what Jesus is saying to both of those groups in this first parable is, you're mistaken. You're wrong in what you're thinking. So in verses 8 through 10, we have the parable of the lost coin. And this is a woman who has 10 silver coins, and she's lost one, she's misplaced one. I know none of you can relate to that, because none of you have ever lost anything, right? Listen, I put things in places where I know I will be able to find them. I put them there on purpose. And then I can't remember where that place was. And so then I have to search for them. So this woman, she cleans and sweeps her house. She looks everywhere until she finds it. And then when she finds it, again, there's that rejoicing. She calls her friends, they found the coin. Well, when the tax collectors and sinners hear that, again, they're thinking, well, she still has 9 coins. And one coin, like me, isn't going to matter. It's not the end of the world for her. And so she's not going to, nobody's be looking for me. And of course, the scribes and Pharisees are saying, we don't need the change that fell into the couch. Man, I remember there were times when our kids were in school and small, we weren't doing very well. And we had to come up with milk money, it's like 5 cents for the kids to buy milk at school. And we're looking everywhere. We're looking in the seats. Hopefully, you had somebody over earlier in the week who sat down on our couch and their pocket kind of opened and there was some milk money that they left behind for us. The Pharisees are saying, nobody's going to do that. No, we don't need to do that. We don't need to tear up our house just to find one measly coin. And Jesus is saying, listen, there will not be any rejoicing until all of my children are found. Until every coin is located. Because I want all of my children. And I want you to understand that every one of them, every single one of them is valuable to me. And so just from those first 2 parables, I need you to see the fact that as far as a good friend of mine this last week lost his wife, and he's a very intelligent guy, and he's the one who introduced this word to me. It's called Weltanschauung. I think I'm pronouncing it right. You're saying, what? Yeah, that's what I said when he said it the first time. Weltanschauung is a German word that means worldview. And what Jesus is doing with the Pharisees and the tax collectors and the publicans and the sinners, he's taking their worldview and turning it upside down. Because the way they thought things were was exactly wrong. So that brings us to the parable of the lost sons. And we're going to look at it as the characters are here. And from that standpoint. But I do want to read that into your minds and hearts here. I want you to notice what it says, though, is Jesus continued. No breaks. He went sheep, coins, boom. Next parable. Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estates. So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your servants, or hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his fingers and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. My son, the father said, you're always with me and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again and was lost and is found. So let's begin this discussion with looking at the younger brother. The youngest son. The younger one wants his inheritance. And why? Why does he want his inheritance? Maybe he's tired of living under the rules of the father. Maybe he's tired of living under the judgmental eye of his older brother. Whatever the case, he can't wait for his father to die to get his inheritance. And so he goes and asks him for it ahead of time. And then when it's given to him, a short time after he gets it, he takes it and leaves, and he goes to a far or distant country. Listen, anytime someone is in a relationship with God, there's going to be scrutiny. You're going to be made to confront the evil desires that you have in your heart, the selfishness of your heart, the relationships that you have that aren't righteous or good. And you're going to have to decide to either deal with that issue and make yourself right with God or run. And anytime you run, it's going to feel like freedom initially. And the younger son felt that. I mean, he took that money and he lived it up. He squandered it. Everything that was given to him by his father. Listen, that's what the word prodigal means. Prodigal means to waste. And he wasted his inheritance. And listen, your squandering of God's blessing doesn't have to be just in like drugs and alcohol. Your inheritance from God could be your brains, the intelligence that you have, and you're choosing to just use that for yourself and not use it in service to God. It could be your sparkling personality. Okay, and that you just seem to get along with people and have this relationship with people. And so rather than use that to further the gospel, you're going to use that to further you. It could be your good health. It could be any kind of resource that God has blessed you with that you're just going to use for yourself. You're going to simply live your life without thought or any relationship with God. And that's what the younger son decided to do. He decided to run and listen, when he ran as far as he could. He went to a far country, he went to a distant land. He's not in the neighborhood anymore. And then the money ran out. And here's a young man who's feeding pigs, a Jewish boy feeding pigs and wishing he could eat their food. And it's at that point that he came to himself. He realized how foolish he had been, and he remembered the fullness of the blessings that he had back at home. And again, listen, when you run away from God, seeking your freedom, I can guarantee you that you'll become a slave to something else. You'll become a servant to something else. Paul said in Romans, and this is the only time I'm going to go out of this book, in Romans, the 6th chapter, in verses 17 and 18, he said, "But thanks be to God that though you used to be slaves to sin, you have come to obey from your heart the pattern of teaching that now claimed your allegiance. You have been set free from sin and have become the slaves of righteousness." You're always going to be a slave to something. You'll always be a servant to something. And even if it's you, it's something other than God. But God has given us the choice. And so here he finds himself desiring the food that the pigs ate and decided that life would be better if he went back home. So he prepared this speech. "Father, I have sinned against you and against heaven. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. Just put me on the payroll as a servant. And that's all I'm asking from you." I can just see him as he's walking home. It's a long ways. He's in a far country. I can just hear him rehearsing this story and making all the changes that he's going to make it just as good as he can when he gets there. And again, I sinned against you. I sinned against heaven. I'm not worthy to be your son. Just make me a slave. So what about our audience? What are our people that are listening to this hearing? Well, if you're a tax collector and sinner, you're saying, there's the catch. He's going to be a slave when he returns. I knew it was too good to be true. And so that's what they're saying. And the Pharisees and scribes are saying, thinking, the Father is really going to give it to him when he gets home. He's probably going to say to the son, "Listen, you don't even deserve to be my slave." And he's going to kick him out of the property and tell him never to come back. That's what the Pharisees and the tax collectors are. Let's leave that. Let's move on here. So that's the younger brother. Let's now look at the older brother. Because he stayed home. He stayed home and continued working on the farm. And in fact, in his own words, he's saying, "I've been slaving for you." Everything that's left on that farm, every building, every implement, every animal, every stalk of grain, It's all his. That's his inheritance. And so he comes in from this field where he's been slaving all day, and he hears this huge celebration. And he doesn't go to his father and ask what's going on. He rather calls one of the servants and inquires, and he finds out that his younger brother has returned. And his reaction is, first of all, he judges his father. What a fool. What an unfair person he is to take back that louse of a brother and son. And to quote Michelle, for the older brothers, this is a less than ideal situation. He couldn't be more upset. He's very unhappy that he's come back. And because of that, he refuses to go into the party. And the father comes out and pleads with him. Now, Jesus doesn't tell us what the father said to him initially. I just know that he pleads with him. But I can presume that he's pleading with him to come inside. To come inside and celebrate, that it's a reason for that. The older brother's response is, listen to this. The older brother's response to all of this is, you never gave me a goat. And no pun intended, but I would want to say to him, you've got to be kidding. That's what's on your mind? You never gave me a goat? Everything the father owned is his now. In fact, if they kill the fattened calf, what that means is, listen, there's steak inside there right now, and you're worried about a goat? Let me ask you, if you had a choice between a T-bone and a piece of goat, which are you going to choose? The brother that was presumed dead has come back, and he doesn't even care. His priorities are completely wrong. And he denigrates his brother and says he's spent it with prostitutes. I don't know how he knows that. He's spent it in wild living. That doesn't necessarily include that. He's presuming and going to the worst possible scenario. Listen, that's called prejudice. He's prejudged him unrighteously. And so the father said, we celebrate because it's right. And you should be celebrating too. So what's the audience thinking there? I will tell you that the tax collectors and the sinners are rejoicing. This was not at all the way they thought that this was going to be. This is wonderful. The Pharisees and the scribes ought to be recoiling at what Jesus said, especially if they can see the real picture here, that they are the ones that are being depicted by the elder brother. I can tell you what I think they're probably thinking at this point. We've got to kill Jesus. We've got to kill him. And so they're figuring out how to do that. The final person here is the Father, who is God in this story. And his love and his mercy, his tender care, his tender heart, his long-suffering, his longing for the return of his Son, they're all so evident here. But there's some things I think that we can apply if we listen to what the Father says and we listen to what he doesn't say. Let me back up in just a second here as we come in. Listen, I give every bit of credit to this younger son who had this speech all planned, what he's going to say. And for a lesser person, a person of less character, when the father comes out and hugs your neck and kisses you and says we're going to have a party, you might think, whoa, I guess I don't have to say I've sinned. I guess I don't have to say I'm not worthy to be your son. I guess I don't have to say make me your slave. And he said it anyway. And he said it anyway after all of the hugging and kissing was going on. So the first lesson I want us to see here is God doesn't want your deal. God doesn't want your deal. See, that's what the prodigal had come up with. I have sinned. I sinned against heaven. I've sinned against you. I'm no longer worthy to be your son. So here's the deal. Make me like a slave. Make me your slave. And the reason this is so important is how many people make promises to God in times of distress? Lord, get me out of this, and man, you are going to see someone different. I'm going to be so much better. I'm going to be so dedicated. I'm going to be so this, that, and the other. I'll make sure this happens. God doesn't want your deal. I doubt that the younger son could make up whatever the inheritance was if he worked the rest of his life. But the father didn't even listen. He got right up, the son got right up to, I've sinned against you and against heaven. I'm no longer to be your son. And boom, I don't want to hear your deal. He didn't even let him finish. He immediately says, go get the fattened calf and put the robe and the ring and the sandals on his feet. The second thing I think we can learn from this is we're not going to figure out God 100%. As we grow and mature, I think we're going to come to know more and more about him and know him better. But listen, the Jews thought they knew him. They thought they knew what his reaction was going to be in every one of those cases, and they were wrong. The tax collectors and the sinners thought they knew what God would do and what his attitude was, and they were wrong. And I think we just need to remain open to the lessons that God's trying to teach us, and trying to teach us not only about himself, but teach us about ourselves. And help us to try to become more like him. The third lesson is that the God Jesus illustrated is not the God either of these groups had ever thought about before. But the God that Jesus illustrated was the truth. And they and we must accept that truth about who and what God is. So as we conclude, if you're one who has left God and seeking freedom and seeking independence, the message here is God will take you back. I don't care how far away you've gone. I don't care what you've done in the past. If you come back with a repentant heart and seek to give yourself to him on his terms, he's saying, come home. He'll embrace you. He always embraces a broken and contrite heart. And you can never run too far away from him. If you're one who remained, then when those folks come back who have left, you need to join into the heavenly celebration of their repentance and their return with open arms. Listen, none of us deserves what God is giving to us. Not one iota does God owe us. So don't ask for a goat when he's offering you freely all things. I think in some cases maybe we all need to come to ourselves and to our senses and see ourselves for what we are and who we are and where we are. That we are in need of God's grace. And with hearts just full of gratitude for all that he's done for us. So don't gloss over your lost condition, and certainly don't gloss over your self-righteousness. Don't have any of that. So did you say the song was Who at My Door is Standing?
Yes.
Come in. That's what Jesus is saying. I know I woke you up, some of you, with that. I'm sorry. But there's somebody knocking who wants to come in. And he wants you to come in. Please let him do that. If we can help you with that, please come forward while we stand and sing.